Thank you for coming to the pre-application grant workshop for 5310 grant. As I said, I might make this recording available online and then see from there. It shouldn't take a full hour. I'll go quickly a little bit. Let me skip here ahead. So our agenda is basically go quickly through the FT310 program, just like where it comes from, what it does, and then main focus for me is basically to go a little bit through the application and the guidebook to kind of explain that and then answer questions if there are. The FTA Section 5310 is a program with a goal to enhance mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities by removing barriers. It's important that this program targets especially those groups. So if you provide transportation, you cannot just provide transportation that includes those groups. It needs to be a program that especially focus on seniors and or individuals with disabilities. And that's basically comes from the federal guidance. I have here basically the law where it comes from. And then at the bottom, you can see the guidance of the circular. That's basically where all the information comes from how the program is organized, what is eligible projects, and how the funding works, and so on. This has been updated recently. Normally, it's not updated very often, but if there's any questions on the background, you can go there and read on it. Our program is for the OTO area. So this is a map kind of showing what our area is. So it's the Springfield metro area. The boundary there shown is basically set up by our set up and our organization was created by the board. So it includes most parts of Christian and Greene County, but not all parts. You can see it's Springfield, Willard, Stratford, Republic, Battlefield, Nixon, Ozark. There's some areas that are outside, and kind of same with the program. It has to be transportation that either starts or ends in our area, but it needs to be focused on that OTO area. So it could be possible that you're an organization that provides trips to outside the area. That's fine as long as they start in that area, or that you bring in people to go. You bring them in from, let's say, Florida or something into Ozark. That's eligible under this program as long as it's within our area. And there has been kind of a change to our program in the past. It has been that OTO, the Ozarks Transportation Organization, only does the call for projects, and then everything else would go to MoDOT. We are now what's called a designated or direct recipient of FTA funds, and that means MoDOT is no longer for this funding and future within the program anymore. If you had vehicles in the past, you still have to go through MoDOT on some of the reporting, but OTO will now, especially for the funding we're doing on the vehicles, will basically do the call for projects and then administer the program, so purchase the vehicles, and then also do the reporting and oversight. The other part is there's some funding that goes directly to CU Transit. And let me click here. So we administer the traditional funding. So 55% of that annual funding we get from the Federal Transit Administration goes to us, and 35% goes to CU Transit for non-traditional projects. And again, I showed you earlier the guidance, that's where all those projects are in. And I'll talk a little bit about what our projects are. I'm not going to go too far into what CU does. I do want to mention that they don't have any sub-recipients, so they get that funding for the non-traditional projects. And then there's 10% of the funding that goes to administration, so helps fund my time to help oversee agencies and do the procurement. And some of the funding goes also to CU that is split up. So for our area, the eligible sub-recipients, so that's under OTO, is mostly private nonprofit organizations. So the funding is not for-profit agencies, and there's possibilities that state or local governments, so public entities, can be eligible for funding, but they would have to demonstrate there are no other providers, especially no profit providers doing this, or that they're the best to coordinate the funds in the area. But again, very important, it has to be nonprofit organization and cannot be a for-profit. In our area, as I mentioned, there's traditional funding and non-traditional. So we get the traditional funding, which is all capital projects, and our board has decided that we only fund additional replacement vehicles and the associated equipment with it. So the lift or anything that you purchase with that vehicle that helps, especially on the ADA side, so American with Disabilities Act, helps to improve that vehicle, will be lifts, extra seats, or extra securement systems. I do want to mention already that in the guidebook, there's a note saying that you can purchase vehicles that are not ADA accessible, so don't have a wheelchair lift, but then your organizations need to show that you still can provide service if you have somebody with a wheelchair. So you have to have either a different vehicle that is functional to transport somebody with a wheelchair and that it's not an extra or that it's not an inconvenience for them to they ask for those service. So it's possible, but I always highly recommend to just go with wheelchair accessible vehicles, since if it comes up, you might not have somebody now, but maybe in the future somebody comes up. And then also the ramps sometimes help too. It doesn't need to be a wheelchair, but it helps to help people with um, walking assistance to get on the bus, or even if you have some heavier loads, so if you do a trip or something, and you can use that wheelchair lift for that as well. So on the funding side, we have for this call for projects roughly 470,000 available. That's 2 years of funding. We get around 420, 440,000 per fiscal year from the federal government as a region, and then, as I said, 55% go to us. So these are 2 years combined for that funding. Something that is changed too with us being now the direct recipient is under MODOT, it always used to be, so there's a local match requirement, and under MODOT it used to be you have to have 20% local match. So 80% when you apply for a project would be funded by the federal government, and then 20% used to be under MODOT. With us being direct recipients, there is some um, ways to increase it. So if you buy an ADA accessible work vehicles for under the Clean Air Act, so it would be low emission vehicles, you can get 85% federal funding, and you only need 50% local match. So the money you need to bring up locally will be lowered by like 5% of the total amount. I think that was one of the main reasons we tried to become a direct recipient, to give that option for MODOT. They do it statewide in different programs, so it's a little bit harder, and they want to spread the funding. For us, I think it is important that we can then offer and lower the burden for nonprofit organizations to buying vehicles. I do want to quick in the guidebook, it has some language on what local match can be. So it has to be non-FTA related funding. There's some very small chance that you can use other federal funding on it, but normally it means either funding that comes directly from your organization, something maybe you get from the state, or locally donations or things like that, or some revenue you do yourself. As I said, there's some ways on some federal funding, but I would highly recommend reach out or check with that other source that you're allowed to use that as local match. This is our scoring criteria. So this comes from our current transit coordination plan. We set in there some goals and strategies, and then we come up with a scoring from there. I want to mention then in the back, it kind of shows a relevant section that kind of relates back to the application. The online application of different sections, and then just as an orientation where you can find where these questions are under, where it gets scored. There is some reference to it. The guidebook also has some more explanations on what we're looking for the different scoring, or how it's scored, what the questions relate to. There's 3 sections, so all the points are normally either you get them or you don't. Besides, there's 3 sections. The one is a project will lead to an increase in the ADA amenities. The third one is up to 10 points. So there will be basically scored by our local coordinating board for transit. We'll score that, and then we might not give the full 10 points, or depending on the answers to the questions. And then the same as the intercity connections, that's up to 5 points. And then lastly, the project lines with the strategies of the transit coordination plans, that's also an up to 5 points. The rest is basically either you do it or you don't. And then, as I said, the guidebook gives a little bit explanations on um, kind of how you should apply to that, and I can go over that in a moment. Some things to consider when you do the application if you do not have a unique identity and identifier. Sorry. You have to go to sam.gov and get that. So it's called a UEI. It's basically you register with the federal government and get a number. So when you get the grant, it can be tracked back to the organizations. It might take a while. So if you don't have it, I would get soon to start that progress to get it done before our deadline. Title VI plan, so there's a requirement to that you don't discriminate against race, color, or national origin. You and you have to have a plan for that in place. You don't have to have the plan in place when you apply for the funding, but you would need to have a plan before we basically order the vehicle, so before we sign a contract with that agency. And there's templates we have available to make a plan, and feel free to reach out to me. I'm glad to help with it. It's basically just giving notice. You have to put a notice up in your office saying that you don't discriminate, and then they have to have a formal procedure on how people can file a complaint. And then also, lastly, it's kind of a review of what kind of population is in your service area. And again, I'm glad to help with any of that. Then we do have a standard acknowledgement, which is an attachment. So that is kind of some provisions in there saying that you will comply later with, or we will include federal clauses in the contract that's required by the federal government, and also that you will maintain the vehicle later on, that you have the local match. So that would be something to read through, and then needs to be signed and uploaded with the application. And then there's some other required documents, mainly it's a resolution. There's also, we ask for that you upload your tax exemption to show that you're a nonprofit organization, and then also provide a letter for the local share. And then, as I said, the other documents I already mentioned, the Title VI and the acknowledgement. Normally here, I stop quick to, before I go over the guidebook and the online application, see if anybody has any questions. Since we're fairly small, do you have any questions for me right now?
No, I was going to ask where the guidebook is, but I see that, so
Yeah, so I'll go quick over this and let me just stop the presentation. Oops, that's not what I wanted. So the guidebook, if you go to, as I said, Ozarks Transportation, what we do, transit, and then you have to scroll down a little bit. So there's a guidebook right here, and then
okay.
the appendixes with the different documents is there. There's also a link here to where you can apply, but I thought you already started your application.
Yeah.
Then I said maybe later I will put that on. There's also the transit coordination plan link there. So if there's any questions on, yeah, the questions you have to answer, how your project relates to any of that, and that's something you can look up there.
Okay.
So let me quick, and I have the guidebook already somewhere open. Oops, wrong window. So this is basically what our guidebook looks like. It's a PDF document. It has a lot of the same information in the beginning. So sorry for scrolling very fast. Kind of has our deadline dates. We'll go over that in a moment. Again, has links to the application. And then it goes kind of first a little bit what I talked to, introduction, and I will talk about program management plans. So if there's questions too on, I said there's a federal guidance that describes everything, and then there's also our program management plan, which kind of describes our program. It also talks about the requirements that come after the vehicle's purchase, but I will go over that in a moment. Maybe look away if I scroll too fast. Again, the project criteria, local share requirements, talks about one thing I have not mentioned yet. In our guidebook, it mentions That can take up to 36 months. We just left that language in there. We had some years in the past where it took a little bit longer. We do not hope to take that long, and we will try our best to make it not as long. We know MoDOT, it took roughly a year from when they signed the contract to get the vehicles, which seems fairly standard, and we'll try to work on that process to get that as quick as possible to get sign the contract and then we can order, but I will talk about it in the next step. So it's still in there that it might take longer. And with how things going these days, you never know what can come up that delays the procurement as well. Again, the mention of the Civil Rights Act. And then I come here to the instructions. So as I said, it talks again about what needs to be uploaded, documents. I did forget the insurance and the financial statements. So would be for the most current you have financial statements or audits. That's kind of up to you if you don't have audits, do some financial statements. I know you're right. Some agencies like ours go from July to June, so you might not have it fully completed. So then just upload the three most recent one. And then the insurance information is only for agencies that currently have a vehicle. We know that if you don't have a vehicle, you might not have any insurance information because I know they don't like to provide quotes if you don't have a vehicle yet. So that would be something later. But if you have already, you can provide that so we see that you have insurance. Um, I'll leave that out quick. I saw already two people went through and created an account. So there's a quick description on how to get access to our portal. There's some basic information, and if you don't have an organization, please reach out to me and I'll add you, and then you can create your personal account and request access. I'll go over quick in the application in a moment, but there's a couple screenshots showing kind of how to start it and where to do what. And I will skip that a little bit because I'm going to go through that in a moment. And then I talked about here's again the scoring at the section, so it gives a little bit an explanation of um, where you can find it in the application, in the questions, and what scoring relates to what. And then we'll again go over the application. And then there's also links to our transit coordination plan. So when it asks about for the alignment for the transit coordination plan, I try to highlight which pages you can looking at. So there's a needs assessment. You can address how you meet the needs that were described. So if it doesn't fully meet a strategic, but it should meet a strategic goal or action kind of that is outlined, which is on the pages later. I said there's a link on the web page where you find the application. There's one in the guidebook as well. And then basically when you submit the application, you'll have acknowledged the statement in the end, and that basically goes towards works as a signature. So let me quick go out of our guidebook and start a short application. So when you have access to the system, this is basically what it should look like. You don't have as many numbers here since I have can see everything, but you should see here draft, and then you should see here the call for projects. So if you want to start a new project, you just go up here, enter, click new project, and then go select call for CFP, call for project, OTO section 5310. And then the second part should be automatically created. Title, you can see already. So I'll just do project title. I will put it under my name. And then type would be transit capital. And then you can put a short description like replacing two vehicles. And you can change the description later too. As mentioned in the guidebook that this information sometimes helps us too to score, especially what's related to under Section A, said we support and established agencies. Or if you want, you can already put some information in there as well on what your agency does. So start it. So once you created it, it will look like this. This is the programming page I talked to. You can see everything that you have to fill out has a little red asterisk. As I said, there is, and you can change everything now. You will ask to put a county in, so I'll just put green. I think you can put both counties in. Transit subcategory, you would just collect traditional, and then you don't have to do any other things. Location information, you would just need to add a new location and then click NA. Since this is, we also do other projects like trails or roads, so it's still in there, so you can just put NA, or if you want, you could also do off-system NA, and both works, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. It should save in between, but it's always, I think, a good thing if you can just click change, save changes, but then you have to click edit again to do additional changes. Then the programming, so this is basically where you put in the funding, and I can talk to a little bit in a moment. So if you want, you could unclick all of these and just leave capital, so CAP for capital. And then you add two rows, basically one for your federal funding, and you just select 27 year for both, and then your federal. So then, and here you would put just the number on the federal funding. So I'll make it an easy example. We say the total vehicle cost is $100,000. So and it's a 88 vehicle. So it's 85% federal, 15% local. So you would put an 85,000, which is 85% of 100,000 on the federal, and then you would add a second row, 27, add the local to it, and then match it to the make it the 100,000 and 50,000. It will show you red here, just because that's how it's set up in the system. And before it was 80/20, so it does not change it. So you can kind of ignore that it says you don't match it. Since the 85/15 is fine if you have an 88 vehicle. You should not need to fill this out. I mean, it says the rest asterisk, so you can just put in new project, and then it goes. Then you have basically the first page already filled out. And is this obvious, or do you have any questions on that?
No, I think I got that.
And then I will mention maybe here at this moment. Um, so pricing. We will not know the final pricing, of course, till we start purchasing the vehicles. So we currently have some estimates. This is
Okay.
just on the vehicle types I got some feedback on that people might be interested in. I did averages, so I asked a couple other state Department of Transportations and MoDOTs for their pricing, came up with an average, and then I estimated, since some of those are a little bit older, and added some cost increases, what we expect. MoDOT currently is like, we might piggyback from some of the MoDOT contracts, so we might do the MoDOT pricing too, and they're bidding out some contracts. So I'll try to estimate more, or if you have, I would still reach out to me if you have any specific vehicle you're looking for, and I
Okay.
can give you a little bit update. I can also give you like a um, what the floor plans look like if you don't know what the vehicles. This is fairly so.
So I
There's
can
an
kind of go by what we had what we got before, right?
Yeah, I would maybe add some since we've seen some
Add some
increases.
cost, right?
Yeah, as I
Okay.
said,
But
these
I
are my
meant it's type of, yeah, yeah, as far as the vehicle type and things.
Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah.
basically is what do you want to do. These are the most common. So it's like a
Okay.
minivan with a rear entrance. One
Yeah.
is with a side entrance, and then we have those transit vans. I think that's one of the Ozark Senior Centers pushed last time.
Right.
Um, there's a high roof one. They increase sometimes a little bit more, and then they have the medium roof, which are a little cheaper, and then the white cutaway is basically. I think you have one of the older ones too, so it's more of a truck chassis, which has a more of a box in the background and seats a little bit more people.
Yeah, we do have a 12 passenger. So I think that's
Yeah,
our oldest one, I think, but I may be wrong.
yeah, and then generally, I do want to mention too with vehicles, so if somebody later sees it. So if you purchase vehicles that have 15 or more, including the driver, your not under FTA, you have to do drug and alcohol testing, but you have to do it under the federal motor vehicle regulations. So you still, I think normally for a lot of nonprofits, it's easier not to do that. It's just you have to, um, you have to get, your drivers have to have special license, commercial driver's license, and then you also have to do more testing on drug and alcohol. There has to be random testing. You have to do pre-employment testing, which you might do already, but there's more strict regulations to that to buy vehicles that have more passengers. Normally, especially the minivans and the transit vans, they have less people than that, and there's not, or it's sometimes the weight of the vehicle too that reflects that. So it's of over 10,000 pounds, and you have to do a little bit more, have more requirements for that. So I would always think it's easier, and I know a lot of nonprofits too prefer, and they don't have to have a commercial driver's license just because of the requirements a little bit more.
Yeah. Hard
And I,
enough to get drivers without having to do that. So,
yes, and then if you have a certain vehicle type you're looking for, let me know, and I'll keep monitoring. I know the white cutaway buses, Motor just had a bid out, so they might have newer pricing till it's ready. But I would go almost at least with those numbers, not even a little bit more. I always think it's better to plan with higher pricing, and then
yeah.
when it comes in lower, you don't have to go back and ask for more funding. Then you better have a safe cost saving later.
Okay. And is this in the packet or in the
This is
guidelines?
not in the packet of bike lanes since I'm still working on that. So again,
Okay.
reach out if you want to have it, or I can give you the information of what vehicle you look at, and I
Okay.
can help with that too. I know some organizations, some oats sometimes say know a little bit more about pricing. Going back to the application quick, so obligation, you can skip that. Map would be great if you can just, I normally ask either draw a service area, or even if you're new, you can also put a point on. I'm just going to pick something here. I guess I can pick our office. This you could put this in for location for your office, and then you could draw a service area. So you would draw this, and then let's say I'm just going to draw something quick. Let's do since we have. So I'm doing this part of Christian County. But in the end, if this is not 100% correct, I would not get too upset about it. I mean, you can always change it later. You just have to go back on the arrow, click on it, and then you can delete it if you want and draw a new one. But this just helps us, especially if you do maybe do more service or increase your areas. This just helps us to get an idea what the service area is.
Okay.
Attachments. I mentioned what documents need to be uploaded. Let's see if I can, which folder it goes to here. Mm, I'm just going to pick something quick. I'm going to see all the folders. M. I'm just going to click quick and just use all our appendixes. So then it uploads it, and then you have to select a document type. It might not, we have resolution in there, but it might not match exactly what it is, like the insurance information, the audits. You can always click other or informational. It doesn't really matter. And then it basically is uploaded like that. Revision history can also be skipped. And then lastly, you come to the questions. I think they're all pretty straightforward. As I mentioned, scoring. So you can see here up top, it says Section A. And then you can answer the information here on what you do in a certain things. These is section B is something that is not scored, but it's just for us to have some information. We need the UEI, federal employee ID, and then it's asked two questions, which are mostly say no for nonprofits, especially, but we have to ask those questions. And then explanation. Again, section C is a Title VI. So if you don't have a Title VI plan, you can just say no, and then can skip that. And then here you can just write in that you attached a copy or provide a link if you have a plan. And then you come to the project questions. Then you come to the project type. So it would be the description of a vehicle. So include kind of a model. So it would be, as I said, the transit van. You can write transit van, what you think the cost is per vehicle. So if you have multiple vehicles, and then here you're going to put in the amount of vehicles. So let's say one transit van. Oh, I don't fully recall how much I said it would be, but you say it's 84. Oops. Or you would say transit van with wheelchair. Um, Are you applying for additional vehicles or replacing vehicles? So there's different points for that. So you would can put in either both or just use, let's say, replacing. If you do replace a vehicle, please put in the information of the vehicle you're replacing. So basically what mileage it is, how many years it is, what kind of vehicle it is. I would want to mention that if you replace a vehicle that you formerly bought with federal funding, make sure it kind of met the useful life of that vehicle, and that you might have to talk to Motor too if you release the federal interest in it. But normally they do that. So useful life, there's two definitions from FTA, and normally you have the smaller vehicle, so it shows it's 4 years or 100,000 miles and whatever. So you don't have to reach both. It says whichever comes first. And there's also, oops, that's the wrong one. There's a longer cheat sheet about it for different buses. So these are mostly more bigger vehicles, but it has here van 8. Oh, that's the useful life benchmark. Sorry. So you should go by minimum useful life. So the 4 years for a small vehicle has some descriptions there, but you cannot replace a vehicle that is or that hasn't reached those milestones, which is, I would say, fairly rare. Uh, Local match, said state other, you can just put that in there. And then we ask if your agent has been awarded a vehicle in the last 2 years. So that's a simply yes and no question. And I was just curious to see if it scores. So you don't have to worry about the scoring here that much. That will be something we will do later with the local coordinating board for transit. And then there's going to be the different questions. So ADA amenities offered. I always say too, it's or there's an example that are wheelchair accessible. So if you buy a vehicle that maybe has now two wheelchair positions instead of one, or you didn't had one, so you would put something that in, or you maybe have different securement systems, or you think if you buy a new vehicle, an extra vehicle, you can say we have now more accessible vehicles. So it would increase. That's all different ways how you would say you increase it. Um, it's not you don't have to increase the service. It's just a question where you will get more points if you increase it. And then I don't know if I need to go through all the questions. I feel like they're fairly straightforward. Not previously served. So if you expand your boundary and provide more transportation, you would put some descriptions in here. As I said, for us, it's important that the trips still go to the OTO area or end in the OTO area. Um, Number of passenger services, so there would be an estimation. Again, same says there, it's not an increased service is not required. It will just um, give you more points, or if you increase service frequency, that could be from you're doing more trips a day because you have now more vehicles, or even your older vehicle was not functional as good and you couldn't always use it, and now you have a new vehicle which can provide more service and is more reliable. And then it asks for the goals, and that's kind of is outlined to the scoring. So you can click on which strategies from the transit coordination plan you think your project meets. And then on the next question, you can describe how that is met. But then also it's an opportunity to talk a little bit about what other if you don't meet any of those, since some of them are same day service, more flexible scheduling, we're aware that it's not possible, but I said there's up to 5 points on overall how you meet our transit coordination plan. So this would be the opportunity to type in um, how you see that your project will help with that. And there again is a link to our transit coordination plan. And then I have it pulled up here. It's also on our webpage. So you see there's a needs assessment, talks about what users identified back in the days as issues, so you can relate to that, how you address any of the needs they had. And then if you scroll down a little further, and I'm trying to scroll not too fast, you get to our strategic framework where we have those four um, goals. Again, there's a description and then there's also a table kind of talking about the four strategy goals and then action items underneath. So it's kind of an orientation on how you could answer those questions. Lastly, oh, not lastly, second to last, there's a document checklist where you can click that you uploaded everything. You have to do it one by one, just it's more of as a reminder to do it. And then there's, as I mentioned before, the acknowledgement. It has a link again to the program management plan to talk about what the requirements is after you get the vehicle, and then that you will provide the local match funding, and this will be basically as your signature. Again, save changes. If you come then back into your dashboard and now it will show, normally it should just show you here your application, so you will not see a three. You should see there one, and then you can click there and go back and edit it. If you are done, you have in the end to save it, and then there's a button that's going to be submit. So then you can submit it. That has to be before July 31st at 4 p.m. That counts as submit. If it doesn't let you submit, you might get a, for example, here you can see I did not fill out all the questions, so it gives me a notification that, oh, it's not done. And same as here, it gives you kind of a notification that it hasn't been done. If you submit, then you want before the deadline, then you want to do a change. There is a it will be possible, and I think I have a screenshot of that in the guidebook. You can see here submit for review. If you have it submitted already, you can always then unsubmit it, and then you can make changes if there's something that came up after you submitted it. So it will not be, you still can change it. Submitted it. So if you're getting close and you think you're done, I would submit it before the timeline passes, and then you can do still changes afterwards. I'll stop here quick, see if you have any questions regarding the application.
Not at this moment.
Okay. And then also, if you have questions when you fill it out or you have issues, feel free to contact me. As you can see, I can see all applications, so it's very easy for me to help something in the process. Basically, you could jump on a call, virtual call, and we can both see the application and go through it if there's any issues that come up.
Okay.
So let's go back, start my slideshow. So next steps. So once that's all done, July 31st is the deadline. On August 13th, our local coordinating board for transit scores the application and then makes a recommendation to our OTO board. September 17th is then when our board would approve the funding, and then we apply for funding with the Federal Transit Administration. There's going to be a little bit of a delay, like we are probably not be able to do it till October to start that progress, just because they have like a grant system online that closes down in September and then we'll reopen it. And so we have to wait a little bit there. Once we have the approved funding from them, and we can already work then on the contracts with the agencies as subrecipients. I said there will be some federal clauses and everything will be outlined in that. Once that is signed, we have all that, then we can go order the vehicles. Normally, our customers, like after ordering, it takes 180 days in a normal time in the contract to get the vehicles from the vendor. We will then go and inspect the vehicles, and then the vendor will deliver the vehicle to your facility. Um, After that comes annual reporting. Just click on that too. And then that's kind of outlined in the program management plan. Well, it's fairly similar if you are with MoDOT to do what you do with MoDOT. So you have a annually you have to report your Title VI. It basically just goes over if you had complaints. Then you reply, then you have vehicle inventory mileage. So you report what the mileage is and what the state of the vehicle is, provide your insurance. And then also there's only some ridership information that asks. We have it a little bit different for new applicants that you have to, we'll probably do a little bit more oversight at the beginning and then go to that annual too. As I said, everything is outlined in our program management plan as well. So we're hoping this process will not take 36 months from September. I said we'll probably hoping October we can put in the FDA, have that then maybe approved in November, and then we'll sign the contracts. And then there it depends a little bit too, if you have your Title VI plan or not. If not, you have to work on that before we sign the contract and then get the vehicles ordered. So this is again just showing where you can find everything. This QR code takes you directly to the transit webpage. And the links, as I said, I can put the slideshow on the website as well. And July 31st is the deadline at 4 p.m. to submit your applications. That would be it from me. Since only you here, Debbie, do you have any other questions from the moment?
No, that was helpful. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and again, feel free to reach out. Questions, it's fairly easy for me to kind of jump in,
Yeah.
help with an application or answer any
Okay.
questions.
I will do that, I'm sure.